Aryna Sabalenka's name was placed at the center of a firestorm at the 2026 BNP Paribas Open in Indian Wells, and Sabalenka never once mentioned Alexandra Eala, the Philippines, or Filipino fans. That gap between what actually happened and what a generation of viewers was told happened, that's the entire story.
So when Eala plays, we all get together and we all watch her support her as a group of people.
So incredible. This is my first time in the duel, so thank you.
This isn't a tale about two athletes at war. This is a forensic look at how a manufactured controversy exposed something far more uncomfortable about the Women's Tennis Association, the digital media economy, and the new market forces that now control where professional tennis actually goes.
So the year subscription, just in case.
The monthly.
Oh, the monthly.
You only pay when she plays. It's paid to play.
Get the yearly. Yo, it's $77. I love the honor.
On March 7th, 2026, Alexandra Eala stepped onto Stadium 3 at Indian Wells and played Diana Yastremska in a match that stretched late into the night under chilly California air. The final score, 7-5, 4-6, 7-5, meant Eala won in 3 sets. But honestly, the score was almost secondary to what surrounded it. Stadium 3 was packed to capacity. Fans had arrived hours early and stayed in the cold just to be there. They cheered after every single point, including unforced errors and double faults, behavior that's completely foreign to traditional tennis audiences, but entirely at home in the Philippine basketball culture that shaped most of them. Meanwhile, inside the larger primary stadiums, the RLA, the MCA, and the JCA, seats sat empty for hours between sessions. Main draw matches featuring some of the sport's biggest names were playing to ghost towns. And that contrast was not a coincidence. Approximately 1.7 million Filipinos live in California alone. The global Filipino diaspora exceeds 10 million people. By March 2026, Alexandra Eala had become the first player from the Philippines to reach the upper tiers of the WTA rankings, a career high of world number 31. For a nation that hadn't produced a globally dominant individual sporting figure since the peak of Manny Pacquiao, Eala wasn't just a tennis player. Eala was a national project. The BNP Paribas Open had a new demographic on its hands, and it wasn't entirely sure what to do with it. But that wasn't the end of what Indian Wells was about to reveal.
We did like something like $53 million over 3 days, over like in 72 hours, and it was really great.
On March 11th, Aryna Sabalenka appeared at a press conference at Indian Wells. She brought her dog, Ash. She talked about her aggressive playing style. By any account, she was in a good mood. 3 days earlier, she defeated Naomi Osaka 6-2, 6-4 to advance to the quarterfinals. And on March 6th, the same day she talked about her engagement at a presser and played with her ring, Sabalenka defeated Sakatsume 6-4, 6-2. That win was her 100th match as world number 1. She'd entered 2026 on an 11-match win streak after taking the Brisbane International. Her estimated record for the year stood at 18 wins and 2 losses. There was no crisis in Sabalenka's tennis. So where did Sabalenka Goes Off actually come from? The specific incident cited by YouTube channels like Tenalysis and Courtscope involves a moment during a match where a fan yelled loudly just as a player was about to hit a shot. Sabalenka was asked about it in post-match media. Her response was technical and professional. She said that while tuning out crowd noise is generally manageable, a sudden yell at a critical moment can be, and this is drawn directly from the available transcripts, really annoying and tricky. She also said that when a fan is disruptive, it's the chair umpire's responsibility to remove that person from the stadium. That's it. That was the full comment. Sabalenka didn't mention the Philippines. She didn't mention Eala. According to the forensic analysis of available transcripts and video evidence, she wasn't even present at Eala's matches during the alleged incidents. The Goes Off narrative was the product of selective editing. Her general comments on crowd noise reframed, without any factual basis, as a targeted attack on Filipino fans. And that's when you have to ask, Was any of this actually accidental?
I know you guys are probably here for Alex, so I'm sorry to...
The kindling for this controversy existed before Sabalenka said a word. During Eala's match against Yastremska, a fan, described in local media using the Filipino term kamote, entered the stadium and flashed a poster carrying what was characterized as a foul message. The content of that poster was never officially detailed in tournament reports, but it was immediately seized upon by social media accounts, which used that single, isolated event to characterize the entire Filipino contingent at Indian Wells as, in the language of sensationalist channels, disgusting. The backlash was immediate. The Filipino digital community, already primed by a media environment that regularly frames every match as a struggle for national honor, responded with fury. And that fury was exactly the fuel the engagement economy needed. Here's the mechanism. A fan with a poster becomes a national incident. A national incident becomes a controversy. A controversy becomes a headline. The headline becomes a YouTube title. The YouTube title generates clicks. The clicks generate ad revenue. And none of it required Aryna Sabalenka to do anything beyond answer a routine question about crowd etiquette. But here's what most of those channels never explored, because exploring it would have punctured the entire narrative.
Stay up late and stay in the cold and cheer me on.
The platforms generating these stories, Tanalysis and Courtscope, are specifically named in the source analysis, operate within a documented disinformation strategy that deliberately targets Filipino audiences. Fake Facebook pages and YouTube channels have been caught creating fabricated quotes attributed to top players like Sabalenka and Iga Swiatek. Posts have claimed Eala sent heartfelt messages to other players. Posts have claimed top-ranked players disrespected Eala because of her skin color. These weren't mistakes. They were engineered to provoke, to trigger the kind of emotional response, whether pride or outrage, that drives shares and advertising revenue. The result is what researchers call a filter bubble, an information environment where Filipino fans may genuinely believe a personal rivalry exists between Eala and the tour's elite, when the actual documented interactions between these players are defined by mutual respect. Coco Gauff, who on March 8th was on the wrong end of a 6-2, 2-0 scoreline before retiring with an arm injury, publicly stated it was great to be on a crowded court and thanked Eala for bringing a new demographic to the sport. Novak Djokovic called the rowdy crowds a good problem because of the energy they brought. And Linda Noskova, the player who ended Eala's run on March 10th, winning 6-2, 6-0 in just 55 minutes, told the press she really enjoyed playing in front of that large, vocal crowd, even though most of them weren't rooting for her. The players weren't at war, but what happened next changed the situation, because the WTA's own attendance numbers told a completely different story.
Is she bigger than Sabalenka? Is she bigger than Coco? Is she the biggest draw in women's tennis?
Section 5 on 6:45 to 8:30. To understand why tournament organizers were genuinely alarmed, not just by the noise level, but by what the noise level implied, you have to leave California entirely and look at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in late 2025 and early 2026. The WTA finals in Riyadh featured the 8 best women's tennis players on the planet. Sabalenka was there. Swiatek was there. The prize money was significant. The production was first class. And during group stage matches, attendance figures ranged between 100 and 400 fans in venues built to hold 5,000 people. The situation got bad enough that broadcasters were reportedly forced to dim the lights on empty upper sections of the arena just to hide the reality of the crowd from the television audience. So here's the picture. On one side of the globe, Alexandra Eala plays a night match on a secondary court in the California desert, and fans stand in the cold for hours just to watch. On the other side, the tour's flagship event, featuring the sport's absolute best, plays to near-empty houses while producers scramble to disguise what isn't there. That context isn't incidental to the Indian Wells controversy. That context is the controversy. The loudest criticism of Filipino fans at Indian Wells came down to one specific behavior: the perception that they were buying tickets only for sessions where Eala was scheduled to play, leaving the main stadiums empty the rest of the time. Indian Wells organizers were reportedly considering changes to their reserved seating policy as a direct result. But here's the contrarian reading of those exact same facts. The WTA Finals in Riyadh, featuring the 8 best players in the world, drew between 100 and 400 fans per session in a 5,000-seat arena. Those same Filipino fans being criticized for selective attendance were filling stadiums to capacity and staying late into cold nights on outdoor courts. The rowdiest, most logistically challenging crowd at the 2026 BNP Paribas Open was also, by raw attendance numbers, its most engaged crowd. The discomfort from organizers wasn't really about noise levels. It was about what the noise revealed: that a world number 31 player with no Grand Slam title and a Nike deal that was rumored but not confirmed at $75 million was generating more atmosphere than the world number 1, who had just recorded her 100th match as the top-ranked player in women's tennis. That milestone, 100 matches as world number 1, was confirmed on March 6th with Sabalenka's 6-4, 6-2 victory over Sakatsume. It came and went without the kind of crowd reaction that Eala's third-round exit generated. The Eala effect wasn't a disruption to the BNP Paribas Open. For the duration of Eala's run, the Eala effect was the BNP Paribas Open, and that's what connects directly back to the opening hook. Sabalenka's name was weaponized to manufacture a conflict between the sport's established order and its newest market force. Not because a real conflict existed, but because the actual story, the WTA's attendance crisis, and the commercial necessity of the Filipino fan base was far less clickable. So what was Aryna Sabalenka actually doing in the middle of this manufactured war? She was taking photos with Filipino fans after matches, signing autographs, showing up to press conferences with her dog. The world number 1, supposedly at the center of an international incident, was posing for pictures with the same community the internet was telling everyone she despised. The Tennis Channel's response on March 9th? They posted a crash course in the Filipino language for their viewers. That's not the reaction of an organization trying to suppress a cultural force. That's the reaction of one trying to welcome it. And FILTA, the Philippine Tennis Association, had already shown what was possible. In January 2026, they hosted the inaugural Philippine Women's Open, a WTA 125 event in Manila, and sold out tickets every single day. The tournament also exposed a real disparity. Elizabeth Abarquez, a local player who received a wild card, lost in just 44 minutes, raising legitimate questions about whether the grassroots infrastructure in the Philippines can sustain long-term growth. But the commercial success, that was unambiguous. Back at Indian Wells, the tennis community on Reddit had its own critique, noting that many Eala fans were weirdly obsessed with her appearance and sponsorship deals rather than her technical development. The concern about a parasocial relationship between Eala and segments of her fan base is grounded in observable behavior described in the source material. Eala herself has addressed it directly, developing what's been called a discourse of maturity, regularly reminding supporters that her career is a long-term process and that she's allowed to have bad matches without it becoming a national crisis. That maturity got tested on March 10th. Linda Noskova ended Eala's Indian Wells run 6-2, 6-0 in 55 minutes. The crowd that had packed stadium 3 days earlier dispersed. And the bigger question, whether the interest sustains, whether the etiquette evolves, whether the energy channels into something durable, moved with the tour. As the circuit heads toward Miami and then the European clay season, 2 things remain unresolved. Aryna Sabalenka sits at world number 1 with an estimated record of 18 wins and 2 losses and has never, on record, articulated a problem with Alexandra Eala, the Philippines, or the fans who created the most animated atmosphere at Indian Wells. Alexandra Eala sits at a career-high ranking of world number 31, having reached the round of 16 at one of tennis's most prestigious events. Surrounded by a fan base that follows her in numbers the WTA hasn't seen outside of traditional tennis strongholds. Sabalenka goes off will likely be remembered not for what Sabalenka said, but for what it exposed. The WTA has an attendance problem, and right now, one world number 31 player from the Philippines is temporarily solving it. Nobody in the sports hierarchy wants to say that out loud. The real question isn't whether Filipino fans will learn tennis etiquette. The real question is, when Eala is no longer in the draw, do those seats stay full?